Hey, Creator Kings and Queens! Welcome to Business Models for Creators, the show where we explore the reality of people living the creator dream and help you turn your creator dream into reality. I'm your host, Jasmine Love, and today our guest is Lisa LaCroix. She is a TikToker, podcaster, speaking coach, and artful aging expert. She's also a mom of two and a competitive ballroom dancer. I'm so grateful to have her on this show today. Let's welcome Lisa to Business Models for Creators. Lisa in the house. I said, Lisa in the house. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you for being here.
I'm so glad to be here, Jasmine. Thank you for inviting me onto your show. And what a great opportunity for us to connect a little bit because it's been a while. And so I love that we get a chance to connect with a lot of intentionality and a shared vision and topic area that we both love.
Yes, it has been too long. All right, let's dive straight into our first segment, content sponging. As creators, we have to absorb a lot of content to stay inspired. So I always like to ask people, what are you watching, reading, listening to right now? Could be podcast, TV show, book, anything.
I'd say primarily my content intake is on YouTube, on podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And most recently, I've been loving Tom Bilyeu's show. But in particular, I'd say there's a content area around sexuality and especially sexuality for men that I've been following a lot more closely recently. And a couple of the podcasts that I particularly love on that account are one by Alexi Welsh, who talks about love and holistic sex, as well as physical suggestions for men around how to approach sex. And the second one is Sex Upgraded. And the host of that is Taylor. And I think Taylor brings a really fresh perspective to sexuality and to helping men understand some of the subtleties around dating and sexuality that I don't get in the mainstream world. So while I've mostly myself been a speaking and communication skills coach, because I'm also passionate about masculine, feminine sexuality and polarity, and have really recently been doing a deep dive into how to support and help heal the breakdowns between us as people, men and women in particular, so that we can have epic love. Through my own training and through my own work, I have been finding that type of content really particularly inspiring. And to that end, there's one other podcaster that I love, and it's a show called Lovers and Friends by Shan Boudreau. I think that's her last name. Anyway, her show's called Lovers and Friends, and her podcast is also really great. And she comes at it from a slightly different perspective, but addresses a lot of the same content area. So yeah, that's what I'm watching and mostly recently.
Wow, interesting. And I noticed some of your content, maybe not super recently, but kind of in the recent present, is about like male and female dynamics and bridging that gap and intimacy and connection. So I love that.
Yeah, it's been interesting because it hasn't been my primary content area. And like all things in my life, I find that if I go down the path of following what I'm most interested in, it often does not seem to make any sense for what I've done previous to that. But if I look back retrospectively, there's always a through line. There's always a commonality. And so while I primarily done, for example, on TikTok, content around artful aging and how, as well as ADHD and women's empowerment and specifically speaking skills, they all appear to not relate to each other. But if you look a little more closely, then all of those things, plus the relational work and relational coaching around bringing the masculine and feminine together in ourselves and in our relationships, falls all under the banner of how do we heal ourselves and better connect with each other to be in service of epic love, which how is that not a central thing that our world needs more of right now?
Yeah, definitely. And since you've been through all these different phases and different niches, in general, what content creator or creators have been the biggest inspiration to you and how have they impacted your work?
Wow. Well, I'd say for specifically around the idea of content creation, when I had an audio podcast, I followed Pat Flynn pretty closely. And as I've moved more over to YouTube and to video, YouTube, I'd say my primary inspiration is Think Media and the work that they do. There's a whole bunch of them that work together. And Sean Cannell is the person who runs it, but he's got a bunch of other people underneath him. And I'd say for YouTube inspiration, there are a number of smaller creators that talk about Instagram and YouTube that I also like to follow. And so I follow a little bit of everyone, but I'd say those are the ones that I really come back to. And then when it comes to TikTok, that's a tough one. Jaya Rose is someone that I think has good content on TikTok. And then I essentially follow people who I like their content on TikTok and get my inspiration from how they do things. But here's the bottom line of that. I might like the way someone else creates content, say on TikTok, and follow it for inspiration. But where I take that inspiration is always coming right back to me and how can I do it and what is my style and how do I trust myself and my approach and let whatever it is that I do on my content development be okay, because it doesn't always fit the standard idea of what leads to success. So my
Yeah, say
practice is
more about
often,
that.
yeah, I would say that the essence of that is that, and probably the way I would answer many questions about content creation is that I always come back to the practice of trusting myself and trusting my own path, even as I'm getting inspiration and ideas and information and techniques and skills from other people. My practice is always, how do I make what I'm doing okay? How do I trust my own unique path and let that be enough, instead of falling into the trap of so and so says I need to post 5 times a day, so I need to post 5 times a day. Whatever the sort of standard recommendation is, how do I take that in and be influenced by it, but come back to myself as the expert on my own content, which extrapolates to my life? How do I always come back to my own self as the expert in how my life needs to look?
Yeah, and so about that, I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. You have had tremendous success on TikTok. You've gotten over 100,000 followers, and I'm curious, was that intentional and strategic? Did it happen just by following your own passion? How did you build those 100,000 followers?
That was definitely not intentional. And the bad news for anyone who's following this conversation because they want the strategies and how to grow is that I'm not going to be able to give that information out, because what I've found is sometimes the more I try to grow, the less I grow. And when I follow, like you said, when I follow my own path, or I just do what comes in that moment, that's when the surprises happen. And so, in fact, when it comes to, and then the other piece is, like in content creation, as in all aspects of life or anything creative, there's always an element of luck. I was a film and television actor before I had my kids, 10 years. And sometimes people ask me, well, what's the strategy for becoming successful as a film and television actor? Because I really want to become an actor too. And the bottom line, do all the things and do the studying and do the marketing and keep on being consistent. And a lot of it has to do with luck. And I would say, unfortunately, the good and the bad news is that definitely was my experience around TikTok, and partly in timing. I started on TikTok right at the beginning of 2020 when everything was closing down and people were looking for places to be. And when TikTok got a very big surge in its usership because people had more time. So while TikTok had existed before, in 2020, there was a huge uptick in usage for obvious reasons because we were all home. And so I was part of an early adopter, not early adopter, but early from the mainstream adopter of people creating content on TikTok during that time, and creating the things that I felt was needed, what I needed for myself: encouragement and connection and opportunities for being okay, and recognizing all the feelings that we were all feeling at that time, recognizing the ways that we felt lonely or that we wanted more connection, things that are important and are in line with my vision for the world and what I have to bring to it, but also spoke to a larger need. But then the time I really took off on TikTok is when I started making content that does not fit my business strategy in any way, which is on ADHD. And so when I made a couple of some ADHD content, my usership really grew. And so I'd say between the two primary topic areas of ADHD and artful aging, those are the things that people seem to be attracted to in my account. And then I also do speaking skills because that's my skill set. That's what I have to bring to the world. That's what I make my money doing for the most part. And so, and because I believe that most people need support in becoming better speakers. So I have no choice but to bring speaking skills content. So the answer is, and probably a good place to lead to a next question is, my content is not niched. It's all over the place. And I follow what I am interested in, what I'm thinking about, what I'm learning, what feels important to me. And I keep on practicing, trusting that, even though it is hard in a world, it's hard to keep trusting that in a world that says you have to niche, you have to focus, you have to be one pointed. And the bottom line and truth of it is I cannot. So I could try to swim uphill or, try to push against my natural inclination and be that content creator who's following all the rules of engagement, like niche down and to only talk to one topic area and know exactly who your audience is. And the bottom line is maybe I would grow more if I did that, but I can't do it. It doesn't work for me. So my practice is always listening to what is relevant for me in the moment and then continuously practicing trusting that in spite of all messages counter to it.
Yeah, that sounds good. And niching has been hard for me too. It's so hard to choose one topic and go narrow, and that's what all the conventional wisdom says, but you've succeeded without niching, so that's great. It's a great inspiration.
And look at you doing a real niche. I love your niche. I think the focus that you're sticking to right now with content creating and interviewing people, I think it's a great niche. And the beautiful thing about that niche, I believe, is like my first podcast, which was an audio podcast called the Superpower You podcast. It was broad enough that I could bring on people that I thought were interesting. And then under the topic area of superpowers, focus on many different topic areas. So it could be someone who has a superpower in the area of dance. Someone has a superpower in the area of relational dating coaching, someone who has a superpower in the area of writing or entrepreneurship. And I love your niche because it's similar. There's such a wide variety of creators that you can have a lot of variety underneath the umbrella of your niche. So great job on that choice.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's why I chose it, because I would probably grow faster if I did just copywriters or just fiction writers or just YouTubers or just podcasters, but I can't. I want to talk to all the different creatives, so that is what I'm doing.
Yes, exactly. Great job. I love that.
All right, let's move into our next segment, A Day in the Life of a Creator, where we explore the path our creators took to get to where they are and what their day-to-day is really like, so you can decide if it's the right path for you. So, what actually led you to creating content on the internet? Like you mentioned, the pandemic happened. Was that the
Yeah.
trigger, or was it something else?
No, the pandemic's when I started on TikTok. I started much earlier than that, and I've always had an inclination to create content. I, by nature, am someone who is more interested in creating than consuming, even though I love listening to podcasts. If I had to choose between only creating or only consuming, I would always opt for creating. I'm someone who likes to do things. I like to make things. I like to practice my own self-expression. I like to be a model for the various things that I'm interested in. I really believe that self-expression and being a creator as an essence is a powerful way to both create change and live an engaged life. And there's so much against us being creators because there's so much of the world that says, make yourself smaller, don't stand out, you're not ready, you don't know enough yet, someone else said it better. There's so many messages against it that I believe it's an act of reclamation for us to show up and be creators in the world, to show up and share our voices, to tell our stories, to share our messages. So I philosophically believe that being a creator is a powerful healing force and a powerful form of living the fullest life possible. So I've always been inclined to it. And so the first time I ever started to create content, I remember starting a blog way long time ago. I don't know if it was 15 or 20 years ago. And I never really stuck with blogging all that well. But I remember my very first post addressed the fact that I felt a little bit uncertain about it and felt a little about it because, like I said, there's so many messages that say, oh, you're so self-involved if you create content and talk about your experience. I don't know if you remember when Facebook first started, there was a lot of messaging around, well, who wants to hear about what I had for lunch?
Oh, yeah.
There's all these messages that say it's not interesting for people to share their stories because we come from this history where there are very few select people who have been identified as the broadcasters, as the movie stars, as the creator economy now, where your everyday person has a market, a venue, and tools from which to bring and share their information has just exploded in the last, I don't know what, 10 or 15 years, something like that, maybe even less. But it's been a beautiful thing because it's created more opportunity for people to share their experience. And as a result, because so many more people are sharing their stories and sharing their experience, we've had a major move towards authenticity. When people who are content creators or movie stars or broadcasters were just the select few, there was more of a pretense. Because everyone can be a content creator, we've had this beautiful move towards what's really true. Who are you really? What do you really have to share? It's a bit of a long departure from your initial question. So one story I will share is that I wanted to have a podcast for a long time, and I started mine in 2017, 2018. I started planning in 2017 and then started to publish episodes, I think, in 2018. And honestly, the biggest motivation for me personally was my mom died. My mom died in 2016. And noticed that I had been carrying this desire for a long time. Like I'd started with this blog and started putting my toes in the water around how do I create content, because I'd come from this situation where I was an actor, and the only way you got to be creative as an actor was if some top executive and casting director chose you for the part. Luckily, I had a pretty good degree of success in that world, but I noticed that I was dependent on someone else giving me the opportunity. Whereas now I was in this world through blogging, then I saw this podcasting movement happening where the message was, if you can get all the obstacles out of your way, you can be a content creator. It's up to you. You are sovereign in this choice. But I still, because of all this messaging, because of uncertainty, not knowing where to start, not figuring out a niche, not knowing what I wanted to call it, not having the technology, put it off and put it off and put it off. My mom died. I was reflecting and integrating that experience, and I recognized that my mom in our family was the behind the scenes person. She was a bit shy and she didn't consider herself to be very good with words. She would always acknowledge and compliment me and say, Lisa, you're so articulate and you're so skilled at speaking. And I wish I had the ability to communicate as well as you do. And the truth is, my mom was quite shy. And so she and our family played the behind the scenes role. She was the person who handled the money and she did the logistics of our life. Whereas I was a film and television actor. My sister was a singer-songwriter, and my father was a photographer with a pretty high profile and had previously been a musician and singer. And so it occurred to me that my mom's role had been to support us being in the world, showing up and speaking and singing and being creators. And that if I didn't get my act together, get over the BS and fear and things that were in my way of creating the podcast I wanted to have, that I would not be honoring her commitment to our family. I would not be honoring her vision of me stepping fully into using the gifts that I have and the inclinations that I have and the desire I have, ability I have to interview people, to speak, to communicate my story. And so I just got over it then. I said, this is it. I gotta do it. And so that's a bit of a long story about how I got into it, but that's some of the details. I love the question. Thank you so much for such a rich
Yeah,
question.
no, it's good. And so now that you are into it, walk me through what a day looks like on like a time where you're working on content. Like, do you batch your content? Do
Mm.
you make it one at a time? Do you have a morning routine, a pre-camera ritual? Just walk me through your process.
Mm. All right. I feel that this may not be the most ideal response either, because I don't know
There
how
is no
well
ideal
here's
response,
I
FYI.
know there's a part of me that wants to be, here are my 5 steps. And if you do it too, you will have success. And I do not have that. It's just, and maybe that's what you're experiencing in interviewing a lot of different people. I'd be curious to know what you're like, after I answer this, I'd love to hear what your top level takeaways, now that you've interviewed a bunch of people, like what patterns are you seeing? Because for me, the truth is that I always aspire to batching content because it makes it easier and more time, more, it's more efficient. But for me to be that organized is very, very challenging. And I often find if I set a very specific time and I aim for sustainability and I'm going to create, I've tried everything, honestly. I've tried everything. I've had it blocked out where Tuesdays I'm writing content and Wednesdays I'm recording and Thursdays I'm editing. And I've tried batching interview content. I've tried making sure that I'm posting one video every single day. I've tried everything. And the bottom line is that I have no standard way that works for me, except when I try to be really consistent, I often block my own creativity. So sometimes the harder I try to be consistent, the harder I try to have systems in place, the more I sit in front of an empty screen and think, I have no idea what I want to talk about. Whereas if I go with the flow, then the unfortunate reality is there are big gaps when I'm not posting anything and big periods of time where I'm posting a lot more. And do I think that's ideal? No. Do I think that's what people should do if they have another choice? No. But I have not so far been able to create any consistency. One thing that I have done recently that I have found to be pretty useful is I have another friend who's a TikToker, Camille Coher. She does content on beauty and especially for women over 50. So we met each other on TikTok by following each other. We now have a standing half an hour meeting where we talk every week. And sometimes we just complain about how inconsistent we are. And sometimes we're celebrating big wins. But having that connection with another content creator just on a regular ongoing basis for me has been really powerful and has kept me from sometimes throwing in the towel when I would say, oh, it's been too long, forget it. And then I'll talk to her and I'll see some success she's had and it'll encourage me again to be like, okay, I'm going to get back on, I'm going to create another TikTok. I'm going to, get back into creating content. So that's been really, really useful for me. The other thing is I started a series that I called Creating from Bed, where I took all the pressure off myself. This is a TikTok series, but sometimes I repost it. And I took all the pressure off myself on it being good or being scripted or being anything. And I just wake up and sometimes I think, oh, here's what I'm thinking about today. I turn the camera on and I say, here I am. Here's another episode of Creating from Bed. Here's what I'm thinking about. I'm just going to talk about this thing. And it's been good for me because I can be perfectionistic and I can stop myself by thinking this content has to be good before I post it. And so it broke through that a little bit by saying, nope, you don't have to because you're just creating from bed, no expectations. So that's something that's been helpful for me. The other thing I guess I would say is I had to get okay with having long breaks. And something that I'll find myself doing sometimes is I'll just scroll through my content and I'll be struck by something that I maybe recorded a year ago and think, wow, that's really, really relevant. And to now I'm going to repost it. So I'm not shy about reposting things and I'm not shy about posting on different platforms, although I do have also sort of emotional guidelines on what fits where that we could talk about in terms of the different platforms. But having that freedom to enter my own content and say, oh, this is hitting me again. One thing that I found really great, and this is maybe a technical can benefit from, is that say there's a piece of content that I posted maybe a year or two ago. One that comes to mind is a couple that come to mind. One is I did a TikTok on in September, maybe 3 years ago, about people sending their kids off to school and 4 concepts that I heard a professor at my older kids' college talk about for parents, advice for parents leaving their kids at school. And so I've reposted that a couple times in September's when it's been the time for people to send their kids off to school. But one thing I noticed is if there's a content piece that I like, and I have some other ones on speaking skills and masculine, feminine speaking skills, that if I liked it, often there's a time when I think, wow, this video is great. It's maybe a minute long. And I'll think, oh, but I don't like that section. And if I up load it into Splice, which is where I do my TikTok editing for the most part, especially my last minute TikTok editing, I find that I can trim out another bunch of the video that I have a perspective on a year later, like, oh, this really wasn't necessary. At the time, I thought it was so necessary. And I can sometimes take
Mhm.
another 20% of the video out, and usually it is better. And so then I'll post that one, which maybe is 20% shorter. And I found myself even doing that the second time sometimes. Oh, this one still could be even shorter. And it'll just get that much tighter and that much more specific. So I really love re-editing old content to make it tighter, because I think you have the benefit of perspective, both on what worked in the video and what didn't work. And you also have less attachment to every single individual millisecond to it, so that you can more easily cut stuff out.
Yeah, that's actually a really great tip to recycle. That brings me to my other question. It's the opposite of recycling, but that is like a really great tip, and I wish I would have heard it earlier in my content creator journey. But where do you come up with new ideas? You have a lot, like a lot of content. Where do you come up with the steady stream of ideas? How do you keep that going?
Sometimes it's just what's happening in my world. And like I said, trusting that what I'm thinking about right now is okay. And I've tended the last little while to use TikTok as my playground. So the different platforms, and we can talk about the different platforms, but for Facebook, for example, it's much more my personal friends. I mean, I'm now opened it up so people can follow me even if I'm not friends with them, but I'll post a lot more personal things, my dance stuff and things that I'm thinking about, or painful things, or things that have to do with my family on Facebook. Whereas, say, for example, on Instagram, I try to stay more to the Instagram style of things. So I post more beauty routines or skincare routines. Sometimes I'll post a little bit of dance, that kind of thing. But then when it comes to TikTok, that's where I will post anything because I'm trying it out. And maybe it's simply something I'm thinking about, or maybe I want to do a trend, or I want to do a dance trend. So the answer to your question, though, is in addition to coming up with content that is in the moment relevant to me, it's just an inspiration in the moment, I have a process that I call my lily pad model. And it comes from the fact that I have so many different ideas that I can get overwhelmed by them. And I have a TikTok video on this, but essentially the idea is that unlike content pillars, which is what some people use as a metaphor for content,
Yeah.
create I like the idea of lily pads, because lily pads move and they change. Some are small and some are large. They can overlap. And so I have this like concept where you take a pad of post-it notes and get either the floor or a window, some large environment, and you think of everything you possibly can. That means you're thinking about a quote that's meaningful to you, someone that you want to interview, a topic area that you are an expert in, a topic area that you're curious about learning, something that you have as a skill set, something that's relevant in the world right now. And you do a total brain dump on post-it notes, jotting down the idea or the book that you want to review or whatever it is on one individual post-it note. You stick it up on the wall and you just keep on going until you have, who knows, maybe 100 topic areas. And then you look at the post-it notes, all of these things, and you put it into groups. You try to, and a lot of times there are many places. This particular idea around dance could go into the creativity group, or it could go into the personal story group. And you try to make it into maybe 10 different sections. And I call those your lily pads. The
Mm-hmm.
lily pads for me are things like self-improvement, communication skills. Underneath communication skills is speaking skills, for example, or might be masculine, feminine speaking. So another lily pads are things like we've already talked about, like ADHD or women's empowerment. So you get the idea, but here's the beautiful thing that I love. And that's because I have the kind of brain that wants to draw connections between things. I think it creates your unique modality when you say, "Oh, Lisa, you're interested in the content area, the lily pad of artful aging as one of your lily pads. You have a content area around dance and love of dance and starting dance when you did as a lily pad, and you have maybe a lily pad around women's empowerment. Oh, women's empowerment, my dance journey, and artful aging can all go together. I can overlap them and I can tell the story of how I started dancing when I was 49. And it's never too early, it's never too late, and you're never too old to start something new, which is part of my artful aging message. And that it can be an empowering story for me as the person beginning to dance and then to have some success and feel really self-expressed. And so you see the way in which I've overlapped my lily
Yeah.
pads. And now I'm someone who's telling a story, encouraging artful aging through a personal dance story and journey that also has the message of women's empowerment in it. So I have this unique content. So if you have different content areas or lily pads and you start to let them float on top of each other, you will create a unique modality and a unique content area for yourself, while also giving yourself permission to not niche, while honoring the fact that
Yeah.
you have many interests at the same time. It becomes a superpower rather than a liability.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And I also love how you, like, I'm going to use niche, but niche by platform. Because I noticed you're on a lot of different platforms. And I'm wondering how you learned all those different platforms. Did you take courses like how to master Instagram? Because like, I don't even use Instagram. I don't know how to use Instagram. So, like, how to master YouTube, how to master TikTok, or did you just learn by trial and error?
I would say both. I've learned by trial and error, but I'm also very prone to signing up for courses. I don't always use them. I
Yeah.
don't always finish them, but maybe I'll get a good idea from one. That's why I really like the free content a lot of times that people provide, because a lot of times you can get the information without buying the course. And a lot of times I find when I buy the course, I don't use it. And then I just will justify it by saying, hey, I got so much good information from this person, from their free content, that I'm okay with the fact that I paid for their paid so and maybe didn't use it as well. It all sort of mixes in together. And so I guess the answer to your question is, for the most part, I've learned them by doing it. It's the way I learn things. I know I'm an experiential learner. I'm someone who has to throw things against the wall and see what sticks. And as a result, I'm better at some platforms than I am at others. So TikTok is a great place to edit. I really like the TikTok editing platform. I don't tend to edit short videos on any of the other platforms because I don't find them as user friendly. That doesn't mean, for example, that Instagram isn't a great platform. It's just that I don't have, it may be as good as TikTok. I don't, my bias says it's not as good an editing platform as TikTok, but that might just, I know TikTok a lot better. I think you use what works well for you and you deepen and optimize the areas that you like, you make it even better. Whatever works for you, keep on making it better. And then whatever doesn't work from you, either take a stab at it, but don't get obsessed with it. So as a result, I post a lot less on Instagram because I know the platform less. And so I would say I have more content on TikTok than I do on Instagram for that reason. The same thing is true with Facebook over YouTube. I've been on Facebook for a really long time. I know how Facebook works a little bit better. And of course, all the platforms are also changing. So you also have to be willing to keep up with the changes of the platforms. And I think the bottom line is you have to let it be okay that you probably know there's a lot more that you don't know than what you do know. Because
Mm-hmm.
they're changing all the time. There's, like you said, there's so many platforms. I'm terrible about LinkedIn. I try to post stuff on LinkedIn, but I don't really use it myself. So I never really think to post on it. Every once in a while, I think, well, this is where the corporate speaking work is coming from. So I should post some of my speaking skills stuff on LinkedIn, and I'll try to remember. But the truth is, I just don't use it that often. And then, of course, the things that are very TikTok specific, I don't post those things on LinkedIn because I don't see that as being the platform for LinkedIn. So I try to honor the platform's strengths and
Mm-hmm.
work within its strengths so that my content is showing up in ways that are appropriate for the platform and useful on the platform. And let me tell you very clearly that because I'm on so many platforms, I don't use any of them to their fullest potential, probably. And I will take big gaps on each of them. Like, for example, right now I'm really focusing on YouTube. So
Mm-hmm.
TikTok's being neglected. I'm really
Yeah.
focusing on my podcast, getting regularity and sustainability. I'm really trying to post every single week. And as you know, creating a podcast takes a lot of work. And I do my own editing for the most
Ooh.
part. I have someone else who's started to help me now, and I'm training him, and he's starting to get really good at it. But it's taking a while for me to train people to edit the way I like things to be edited, because I
Mm-hmm.
put a lot of time into my editing, or at least I did with my audio podcast. So because I'm really focusing on my YouTube channel right now, YouTube is not one of my strongest platforms by any stretch of the imagination. TikTok and Instagram are really getting neglected. But I also know that there'll probably be a time, a month or 2 months from now, when I feel like my podcast has some sustainability and I'll probably get inspired to come back to TikTok again. And so I have to keep on working on just letting that be okay, because that is the path. That is what happens. I'm dancing with all different things and working on letting my own dance be the right dance.
Yeah, I wish we would have had this conversation earlier. You started before me, but in a way we started together on TikTok. Like when I joined TikTok, you were already there, but it was around the same time. It was the pandemic. I had started on YouTube and I was going steady on YouTube. Then I was like, shiny object. And I hopped on TikTok and I did it for like 2 months and I was going well and picking up steam, but I burnt out. But I didn't know about this idea to like be like, okay, there was a gap, so what, and then come back. I thought it was either
Right.
you post every week and you keep going or you're done. And so I just burnt out and I stopped and I never came back to TikTok or that specific YouTube channel. But I wish we had talked earlier, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I had known I could take breaks and come back, and I may still be on TikTok today.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you make it into bricks. I think is that what you said, bricks?
Uh, I don't remember.
Okay. I heard you say bricks, which you may or may not have said, but I love that idea is that you can take the things that you're doing and consolidate it down into a little thing and then put it back. And you may find that as you're focusing on this podcast, and this is what I'm doing right now with my podcast, I'm focusing on the podcast, but I'm also pulling out little shorts that now I can post on TikTok and I can post on Instagram. Now, interestingly, there is a psychological block to it. There's definitely a part of me that feels like because I've neglected TikTok for so long, getting back on the horse is harder. I think that's a challenge for us to notice and work through rather than just accept as the truth. And so maybe there's a possibility that once you're, maybe there's something you say on this podcast, or maybe one of your guests says something and you want to take a little clip from it and you put it into a 30-second or 45-second or 60-second little sound bite and put it on TikTok again and put it on Instagram. And so I would say there's a dance between continuously trying new things and coming back to the platforms over and over again, maybe a little bit better or trying something a little bit different and letting it be okay if we don't. And I think
Yeah.
that in and of itself is a beautiful dance of how do I keep on optimizing? How do I keep on making this better? How do I keep on returning to showing up here and be okay with it if I don't?
Yeah, yeah. Because the rule, as we were talking about the conventional rules, is you must post whatever platform you're on. You must post at least once a week, or some people say daily, depending upon the platform and who's speaking. But I like how you just follow your own rules. Because what I've noticed you had is a lot of longevity. Like you even said you started creating before 2020, but I started paying attention to your content in 2020, and we're in 2023 now. There's 3 years. I started in like 2013. Like I started, then I stopped, and then started again in like 15 and stopped, and started in 20, and like I was stopped for like years at a time. But I like how you've just gone for years.
Okay, this is super important what you're saying right now, Jasmine. I really want to underline this for your audience and also as a reminder for me and for you.
Mm-hmm.
What you're saying right now is so important. And that is that we have this very short-sighted view that we have to do it a certain way. And when we don't, it's easy to get down on ourselves. But the truth is that when we're content creators, we're creating content that exists forever. And it's
True.
really hard to look at it from the long term. But if you creep on creating content, even if you're changing platforms and you're changing style, at some point you're going to look back and go, whoa, I have a lot of content. Like, for example, even though I've completely abandoned my audio podcast for now, who knows? Maybe I'll start posting my audio versions of my YouTube podcast back on my audio platform, which is on Libsyn. And again, at some point, but I haven't actually posted for a couple of years on my audio platform, but I still have 132 episodes of really, some of them
Nice.
really good interviews. And who knew when I started, I was going to get to a point where I'm going to be, oh, you have 132 episodes, a good chunk of which are really, really good interviews. And they're still getting views. They're still getting listens.
Mm-hmm.
My numbers on Libsyn are still going up. And so I think there's something really important to having the long view, even as we can get so seduced by or overwhelmed by or discouraged by the short-term view where we'll put ourselves through for not being regular or for taking a break or whatever. The bottom line is when we create content, we're creating a body of work that we are continuously contributing it to, maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, maybe various platforms, but we're continuously creating and adding to a body of work.
Yeah, I like that. And I remember I went through this phase maybe like 2 years ago, where we complained to one of my closest friends that I didn't have a body of work. I'm like, everybody has these bodies of work. I have no body of work. I'm so sad. She's like, no, you do have a body of work. It's just spread out across different platforms. But because like I've written books and in podcasts and in videos. She's like, you do have a body of work, but I didn't see it that way because I didn't have this one catalog of books under one pen name or this one YouTube station with hundreds of videos, but I do have a body of work. It's just spread out across different mediums and platforms.
I love that. And I think it's exactly the right thing. And part of the reason that we think we don't have a body of work is because, especially if we're very creative people who are thinking about things, ongoingly, that once we move on to something else, we kind of forget about the other thing, and I'll
Yeah.
give you an example of that is that I was probably 15 years. I stopped acting in when I had my first kid, which was 1998, and that kid's 24 now. So I stopped acting 24 years ago. And I'm going to say that for the first 15 years after I stopped acting, no one knew had been an actor because I never talked about it because I thought of it as being something I used to do. Now my
Mm-hmm.
perspective is that is part of my body of work and it's part of my experience in the world. It's part of what I build on. It's part of what I teach speaking skills from. It's a part of my history and it's a part of who I am. And we have the tendency to, as we move on, especially if we're people who get more involved in the next thing, to put those things as, oh, that was the past, or that book doesn't really count because it's not what I'm doing now. And so some of that is a psychological shift, like you're expressing right now and underlying in an important way, which is that our body of work is our body of work. And sometimes because we don't have it all in one place, we forget to include it as part of the whole package that is us and our knowledge.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. What you said really resonated with me. All right, now it is time to move on to our next segment, marketing and monetization methods, where we talk about how to make money as a creator. So, Lisa, what are all your different income streams? How do you make money as a creator? Coaching work included.
Yeah, I'm going to say that for all the people that you're interviewing, I'm probably not the best person to interview. And actually, I would recommend that you interview my friend Camille Coer. She's doing pretty well on that count, and she is an over 50 beauty content creator. For me, what it's been is mostly that by building my connections with people through being my authentic self and sharing the things that I believe and know and have to contribute. And I come really from a place of wanting to help people and giving valuable content. And I'm not great at thinking, how do I give this valuable content and turn it into monetization? But for the most part, I'd say it's been through people seeing my content and realizing that they either want to do my speaking skills course, or I had a TikTok course for a while. And so the people that wanted to get more on TikTok when I was more involved in that, joining my courses or joining my speaking skills. So I would say the monetization has mostly been through building know, like, and trust connections with viewers and followers that then when they get ready to work on a skill set that I offer, like speaking skills, they'll maybe think of me and say, oh, what do you offer in terms of speaking? And I can say, well, I have this one-on-one coaching, speaking skills coaching, or you can join my Speak for Yourself course, which I'm going to do again next year, or, that kind of thing. So I'd say that's been the most common. But most recently, I have started to get a lot of requests for brand deals, especially from skincare companies. And so
Mm-hmm.
I moved a little bit more into that world where I'll be a brand, but it's a new learning for me. And I do get a little bit unclear on, I won't do things where people ask me to do things for free. I just won't do them. I just have a principle. I'm not going to do that for free. I'm not going to talk about your brand for free. Now, if it's something I love, I might do a video for free, something that I know of myself. So as a result, I get sent a lot of things. And I'm right now working out the principles behind how do you do the negotiations and what is the difference between getting a gift and talking about the fact that you received that gift versus I really love this product. I just recently got on the Amazon influencer path
Yeah.
where you can talk about a product and then that video gets shown only in your Amazon influencer account and gets connected up to that product. But I have a really strong principle that I'm not going to say things that aren't true. I'm not going to play into that or be part of that advertising concept where someone pays you and then you say something because you're making money from it. I don't want to do that. So I've been walking into this path of monetization through brand partnerships and deals in a slow way to try to figure out how do I bridge that gap between what's authentically true for me, because it's a really high value for me. Honesty, authenticity, those kind of high values for me. And so how do I do that while also feeling like it's important for people who contribute for the good of people's growth, that we be paid and be able to pay our bills and thrive also. So it's been a fine line to walk. And
Yeah, of
maybe
course. And I'm not sure if I saw this correctly, but when I was researching for this episode, I thought I saw that you sold merch. Do you sell merch as well?
I do have some merch, and it's been a step, again, part of the whole process. I have not been active about selling it, but I do. I have
Mhm.
some t-shirts and some things that have slogans on them available, and it's set up, but I haven't marketed it very well yet. But I think it sounds like you went through a dive, probably you found it on my website, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
Yeah.
But yeah, under my LisaLaCroix.com website, there's a place where you can buy t-shirts that say things like empowered women empower women, some of those empowerment and artful aging kind of content things. But like I say, I haven't really promoted it yet. But same, like you're saying, I'm trying this little piece. I'm adding this in so that recognizing that it's all part of a long-term process. And now I have this in place, that I've got a storefront and I've got products in it, and I've started to add to it, and I can continuously add more. And maybe a year or two from now that will take off, or I'll have more energy to put into it. But I continuously putting the building blocks and the foundational pieces, or putting the foundations in and then adding building blocks to it over time, and continuously going back to looking at this as a long-term path instead of a quick make money, get rich quick, or become, whatever. And nothing's quick about it. I look at this process as being a creator, and monetization as a long-term process.
Yeah, and you said something earlier that, because I was about to ask a question, but it's kind of answered already. I was going to ask, where do you get your patience from? Because if you read stuff like on Medium or see stuff on YouTube, it's about how to become a creator quickly and monetize quickly and make a bunch of money in your sleep quickly. But you are able to take this long view. But I think I know why. Earlier you said you just have this innate drive to create. You don't create to monetize. You create and you monetize to live, to pay your bills, but you want to create anyway regardless of the money. Is that correct?
I would say that's true, is that I see being a creator as both healing and to self-expression. I think that's what I said earlier. And I would say that's a good catch on your part, because I think at the essence of it, that's true for me. And that you can zoom that out to a larger philosophical attitude, which is that I see the things that I choose to do as a learning and growth path rather than a results path. And to a fault, I would say, because I can't tell you the number of people who've said, "Oh, I've gotten so much from your content," but there are people who've never hired me or never bought anything. So in some ways, I could probably do a little better on the monetization side, instead of I'm creating this for contribution and for my own self-expression, take advantage of it. But that is what makes it sustainable for me in the long term. I see it as being a growth path. I don't see it as being a I don't see it as being a matter of, if I don't get to X number of followers or I don't make X number of money, that I've been a failure, because I'm doing it for larger reasons. I'm doing it, like I said, to create a content bank over time, to create, a body of work. And so whether I get followers or make money, I get to still create, like, it's win. I make it so it's win-win. If I don't get followers and I don't make money, I'm still building my body of work. I'm still helping people and contributing to healing in the world and my own self-expression. And I'm getting to have fun and explore and learn for myself. So I think there's always got to be a secondary motivation. If you only have the motivation, and that's the same thing with acting. The first thing I ask people when they say I want to be an actor, I'm saying, well, what's your motivation to be an actor? Is it because you're hoping you're going to become a star? Because the chances of that are slim. If you're only wanting to become an actor because you want to become a star, like A-list working actor, I say don't do it. If you want to become an actor because you see it as a path to personal growth and to deepening your own self-understanding and to increasing your range as a human being and to learning and growing, then by all means do it, because you can always have that, whether you're successful or not. But I would say that kind of growth mindset's necessary for creators and anyone doing anything. You have to have a personal why that is motivating and that in and of itself is enough.
Yeah, and I think that is so important. I'm glad you shared that because there's so much content to the opposite about the end goal, and that's how people burn out, and that's how people start to like really get discouraged because they haven't monetized yet or they haven't hit 10K followers or 100K followers. But I like your message of having the innate why, and I like that you enumerated some to build a body of work, to grow, to explore, to help people. These are all great reasons to create content and to help you stay motivated even if you haven't monetized yet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the chances of us being, becoming stars or A-list actors, the chances of us becoming influencers with millions of followers, the chances of us becoming super rich, they're it's doable. We know because we see people doing it. It's possible. And it's also, there's a lot of luck involved in it that we don't have control over, no matter whether
Yeah,
we're posting daily or not.
that's so humble of you to say because people with courses say, like, I got this because of my 7-step method, my sure proof proven
Yeah.
method, but there is an element of luck, and so many people will not admit, whether it's success or failure, there's an element of luck, and people will not admit that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, people want to believe that it's because of their hard work or it's because of their skill or their innate talent or all those things. But the truth is, in any kind of creative field, there's a huge element of luck in it. So,
Yeah. So, based on what you know now, because you've been creating for a long time, both as an independent content creator, as an actress, and you've already shared some lessons, but based on everything you learned, is there anything you would do differently leading up to this point?
I mean, it's an interesting philosophical question because if there's something that I would do differently, I probably would have done it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's a certain aspect to you do what you do because that's what you did, and so there wasn't really any other choice. So that's the underlying truth of that kind of question. But then to take your question for for how you really intended, the spirit of your question, I don't know. I think, what would I have done differently? I think I would have started to get gentle with myself early on. I would have wanted to learn the lessons that I've learned earlier. I mean, some of the things that I've shared today, I would have wanted to know. I would have wanted to, well, I don't know. It's also an ongoing process. It's not like it's something that ends or that I know now that I don't know. It's an ongoing dance to keep on reminding myself of the things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's anything that I would have done differently. I mean, there's specific things, like I've shared this before with people, is I would have got a different kind of originally did. I don't like the mics I originally got. There's specific things like that. Here's one thing that I would share. I think, and I've sort of implied this already, but I would have wanted to know that you don't hit your stride until you get to be, in my opinion, my experience is about 25 or 30 episodes of a show.
Mm-hmm.
You're sort of working it through and working it out. And there comes a time after a certain number of episodes where you realize, oh, here I am. I know what my template is. I know what works best in terms of types of questions. I know how calculation of what a superpower is lands in a way that's meaningful. I know that I like to end the episodes with X, Y, or Z. And I feel that you don't get really natural with that until you've done a bunch of episodes. So I say start that. I also tell that to people who are dancers who haven't started competing and they want to start competing, but they don't feel they're ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
I usually tell them, you're not going to get to the point where you feel comfortable competing as a dancer. And my dance is West Coast Swing, and it's a partner dance. And we compete as Jack and Jill. So you get matched with someone by luck or whatever, by
Oh,
draw.
goodness.
And so you don't go with a partner. But so I always tell people, if you think you want to compete, start competing now, because it probably doesn't matter if you start now or you start in a year. It's going to take you 20 competitions to feel like, oh, okay, I'm not completely nervous or whatever. It's going to be the same amount of times competing where you get comfortable with competing. So why not start now? And I say the same thing
Yeah.
for content creators. I'd say don't wait for perfection. Don't wait to feel like you know exactly what it is. That when you start, you do the learning and you can learn as you go. You don't have to wait till you're already cooked to begin. And in fact, some of the best learning and the best evolution and the best development of what your story is, who you are, what your show's about, what the template is, comes from doing it and iterating.
Yeah, I love that. And that applies to, I think about it with writing. I've been I've been a professional writer for a really long time, but sometimes I still have imposter syndrome, and I'm like, oh, I'm not ready. But you just have to get in there and do it. And I just recently started taking a comedy writing class, and every week when I have to do my homework, I get so nervous that I won't be able to think of jokes. I can't do it, but I'm like, I have to do it to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yes.
can't wait until like some genius comes down or until I'm ready or developed. The way I'll get developed is by practicing this skill. I have to remind myself of that.
Yeah, I think we all do because we're human and because we live in a very results oriented society and culture and time. And so I think it's a constant practice for us to keep on coming back to that and remembering that we don't need to be perfect. We can evolve. So what you just said, right on, I'm right with that. I think it's true. And I don't think you're alone because there's so many messages that push up against that for us.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm going to seemingly contradict something we talked about. We talked about how luck is an element of success, but I'm going to ask something that implies luck is not an element. And that is, what was your biggest win as a creator and how did you make it happen?
Oh, okay, I'm going to throw this back to you because I'm struggling with what kind of win are we talking about? Like, are we talking about results oriented win? Are we talking about, like, in which case I'd say the biggest win, maybe somewhat, it's sort of like, what do you value as a win? I guess is the
What do
question I'm going to
you,
throw back
no,
to you.
now I'm going to throw it
What do
back to
I
you.
value?
What do
Well,
you
okay.
value as a win?
So, I mean, I think I've already said that, which is I value that I get to contribute and I get to self express. So for me, the biggest wins are when I find something where I get some freedom from all the outside messages. And I just gave that one example of, oh, I really like my series Creating from Bed because it gives me that liberation, that freedom. It gives me freedom from the idea of it should be a certain way. For me, the wins are more, they're more small steps. They're more, oh, I like that content. I really felt like I communicated what I wanted to say in that way. I also have had so many people in terms of service and serving people and helping. I've had so many people reach out to me at different times and say they've either been inspired to do something new because of my artful aging content, or they've had a shift in perspective around what it means to age, or they're in their late 30s or 40s and feeling like they were starting to feel fearful about aging. And because of the content I share and because of the things that I do in the world, they feel there's possibility outside of what the limiting beliefs they previously had was.
Mm-hmm.
I've had so many people reach out and say, I follow your content and I've been really working on pause and seeing if I can bring pause and reducing my filler words. And it's really making a difference in how I'm being impacted. So I think the place that I feel the most success is when people reach out and say, your content really made a difference to my life or to the way I experience myself. Those
Mm-hmm.
feel like the best wins for me. Like that's what I really, it sounds like a platitude or whatever, but I really do feel like making a difference in support of people feeling more whole. They are more okay about their lives. For me, that gives me the biggest sense of satisfaction. So I have to call that my biggest win.
Yeah, I love that. And like, this is not what you said, but I think I want to highlight this. A lot of people feel very frustrated with the state of the world. There's so much going on. As we record this, there are like wars overseas, there's injustice at home. But like, if you ever feel powerless or depressed about what's going on in the world, try to make a difference where you can. You may not be able to stop the war or end poverty or injustice, but if you make content that changes somebody's day, then like you're counterbalancing like the negativity in the world. So I think what you're doing is great, and other people should do it too if they feel caught to it.
Yeah, 100%. And thanks for naming that, Jasmine, because it's something that thinking about as probably most people have been thinking about and content creators also as we're creating our content. Like, how do I go and talk about skincare when there's so much pain and injustice and suffering in the world? And, or how do I go and talk about how I'm feeling particularly happy or I'm loving this dance? And it's really easy to stop. And I experienced this during Black Lives Matter a lot too in the early days
Mm-hmm.
of 20 was how do I speak about what's happening in the world or how do I keep on just creating content about the basic things when I feel that needs to be said. I feel that even more now in terms of the Middle East and what's going on with the wars in the world because I don't feel like I have any ability to impact it. And so I have
Mm-hmm.
to continuously come back to exactly what you just said. There's going to be all kinds of people who are going to be upset that you and I and everyone aren't taking a stand for who knows which side, one side or the other, and
Okay.
and they're going to be people that are going to take whichever one you take. They're going to be people who are going to be mad that you took that stand. They're going to be people who are mad that you don't take any stand. How can you continue creating blah, blah, blah content when there's all this going on? But in the end, what I come back to is the personal is universal. And the only thing I have an impact on is, can I have a positive impact in the smallest of ways? And I have a video that talks about, what if the only accomplishment you had today was you made someone smile? Like,
Mm,
why is that not enough? How do you know that little moment where you had a conversation where someone felt a little more seen or a little more connected or a little happier or a little recognized or appreciative or connected with you, that's not spilling out into the world in some positive way? And in the end, that's all we can do. So I have to keep on focusing back on, how can I make a difference in the people whose lives I touch immediately and whose lives I touch more extensively?
yeah, and I wrote a poem about this. I never published it or shared it. I forgot what it's called, but it's just about how, as creators, we don't have to solve world hunger all the time or feed the orphans. Like, you make a big difference with your art. Like, my favorite song makes a big difference to me, or my favorite comedy special that I watch. So every little thing you put out there could be the thing that shifts somebody's mood or perspective or brightens their day, just like you said. Exactly.
Yeah, and we just sometimes have to remind ourselves that, because we do live in a world where, like, the polarization and I don't know, it's a hard thing as human beings to feel that there's suffering out there and that we can't do anything about it, and to keep on trusting that what we're doing is enough. And I have a TikTok on that I do really love, and I've played it. I've republished it multiple times, and it's sort of the foundation and the essence of what this conversation has been about all the way along from the beginning. And that video says, well, what if you trusted yourself? What if you trusted that what you say is enough? What if you trusted that what you're doing is enough? What if you trusted that who you are is enough? What if you just trusted? And I think it's a bit of a radical perspective in our culture that says you have to be more, better, or different, and that
Mm-hmm.
you need to be being something other than you are. Well, wow, how would the world change if more of us just trusted ourselves, felt like we're we're sent people who want good for the world and good for ourselves and good for each other. We can just trust that what we do is enough.
Yeah, easier said than done, though, but that would be a beautiful thing.
Easier said than done, for sure. It's for sure. That's why I keep to remind
Yes.
myself and other people.
Exactly. And now you're probably going to tell me you're not the best person to ask, but I do want your perspective specifically. What do you think is the best way to monetize as a creator for someone like you? Because, like, ADD, you said you can't stick to a niche. Consistency is hard. So, what is the
Yeah.
best way to monetize as a creator?
I don't think there's any one best way. There's so many ways. I mean, some of the ways that occur to me as a creator, there are many ways you can monetize as a creator. There's what I already said. You can sell your own services and products by building know, like, and trust, or by doing lives. You see the women who are showing wigs, and they're selling them on the moment. That's a great way to use lives to sell your product. I was in a clothing store yesterday, and they were on Instagram Live showing things and selling them. So I think you can sell products and services through building know, like, and trust. It's funny because I find now, whenever I'm looking for a service, whether it's a lawyer or financial planner, I almost always want it to be someone that I can see who they are by speaking on a video. Like, they
Mm.
have to have a YouTube channel or a TikTok. Just somebody it used to be we'd call a person from the phone book. Know, like, and trust really matters for selling products and services. So that's one way. Of course, like I already mentioned, there's affiliates where you get a percentage of products that you sell. There's brand deals where you talk about different brands and make money by the brands paying you money to talk about their product. There is a merchandise, like you mentioned already, where you're selling things through your audience and your followership, which, of course, then the bigger followership you have, the easier it is to sell things. There is AdSense on YouTube. After a certain amount of followership and viewership, you get you're monetized on YouTube. I think YouTube, as far as I can tell right now, YouTube is the best platform for monetization and recognition of creators. I'm also on the TikTok creator platforms where they pay you to create content, but I've not found that to be very lucrative at all at any time. Some people, if you have probably if you have millions of followers, you can make money doing that, but you have to have really a lot. And then there's also the there's another one I was going to say around that. Oh, you can get gifts from people on various
Yeah.
platforms, either buy me a coffee where ask somebody to give you $5 in recognition of the fact that your content is useful, or TikTok gifts where people will give you things. I think the platforms are making more money from those things than I certainly have. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's ways. Obviously, the more authentic you can make your content, the more true to yourself you can make it, the more you can stick around and have longevity. And if you're lucky, the more you can build a bigger followership, the easier it is to monetize in any of those ways. And so I don't think there's any one way. I think keep on trying, play for the long term, and try out different things and see what works.
Yeah, I like that. And I like the method that you chose, which is I heard it's easier with a smaller audience to just sell your own courses and
Yeah.
solutions on the back end because you can have a smaller audience, whereas brand deals and affiliates and merch, you need like a larger audience.
Yeah, exactly. That's I think for smaller creators that's really true. Someone that I know named Kevin Kelly, he wrote an article that's been propagated and doesn't always give him credit, but I'm pretty sure he wrote it, called 1,000 True Fans.
Yes.
And the idea is that if you have 1,000 people who really love you, who really resonate with you, who really connect, then those true fans you don't have to sell. If you have 1,000 people who for sure are going to buy your small priced offerings, you can do pretty well. So it's just another approach, and it's approach that makes more sense for people who have smaller followings.
Exactly. All right, now let's move into our final segment, Going Deeper, where we get to know our creators on a more human level. This one we touched on before, but I want to hit it again because I didn't really emphasize what you said the way I wanted to. So, as we mentioned earlier, you identify as having ADHD. Which ADHD symptoms do you personally struggle with most, and how do you manage them?
I love that question because I do think that the realization of myself as someone who has an ADHD-like brain, and I say ADHD-like brain because I'm not diagnosed. I'm self-diagnosed as having an ADHD-like brain. And because I don't know if I have ADHD, I think it's a spectrum, but I definitely have many of the symptoms of ADHD. And here's the amazing thing for me that's been really interesting is that when I realized that I have an ADHD-like brain, it transformed my life in so many beautiful ways because all the things that were always true, I recognized through a different lens, and a lens that gave me a lot of freedom and a lot more personal awareness. Before
Mm-hmm.
that, I had experienced them, but it was a vague feeling of, and I didn't really understand it. I just didn't have the self-awareness around it. So in answer to your question, the things that I relate to as having an ADHD brain, I I do mostly see as positive, but there are so challenges to it. And that is I have a very fast brain. My brain works very quickly. And I'm my brain is constantly ahead of my mouth. I have to slow myself down because my brain goes way faster than my mouth does, and my mouth goes pretty fast. But I always have new ideas. I'm really attracted to the fresh, shiny object idea, and I want to go deep in it, and I see it, and I love it, and then I see another one, and I have this video I've been meaning to make for a long time, but I haven't made it yet, which is that the way I've experienced my life always, I had an ADHD-like brain until I was in my early 50s, but as early as when I was in grade 3, I used to add, 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 add. And so my father has this joke about the time when I signed up for the crossing guard. Like I was, pick me, pick me, pick me. I want to do it. I want to do it because, oh, who wants to be a crossing guard? I do. And I'm signing up for the crossing guard at the same time as I already signed up for folk dancing and for choir. And so for me, that is very typical as I'm really enthusiastic about doing a lot of different things and I want to do it all and I don't want to say no to anything. That to me is
Yes.
very typical of many ADHD type brains and the
That's me
impact of
too.
that.
Yeah.
You too, yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I've seen all the ways that you get excited about things too. And I don't want to finish things. And And when I'm really excited about something, I can go deep into it. And then I've dropped all these other things that I felt I was. So my metaphor in this video that I want to make is the way that, like, if I have one ball, right, and I'm throwing the ball up in the air, I'm like, that's boring. It doesn't have any interest. I need to add another ball, right? Okay, so now I've got two balls in the air. Not really hitting it either. It's okay. It's a little better than having one ball. Oh, but there's a shiny new ball. Okay, let's add that ball in. And then I've got three balls in the air. And like, okay, it's getting a little bit interesting now. And then there's another four balls. And then suddenly there's this sweet spot where I have like five balls in the air. I'm totally jazzed and energized, and it feels so good. And I know that there's a place where I know if I add another ball, everything's just going to drop to the ground, and I'm going to have everything on the ground. I'm going to completely fall apart. But there's that sweet spot right before that dangerous side where it's like, ooh, this is juicy and rich and fun and engaging. And I'm
Yeah.
feeling like I'm always doing that dance, looking for where I don't have so many balls that I completely overwhelm myself and drop everything. But I can't deal with one ball or two balls. Even three balls is just not enough, you know? So those are some examples. The other thing is that on the more painful side, I tend to be an interrupter. And because my brain's going so fast, and I found that to be really damaging in some of my past relationships. But the more I'm aware of it, the more I can say, you know, like I remember having a really beautiful conversation with my sister, who's a very slow, methodical processor, and she's very intentional in her speaking. And she always experienced that I would be the way I am. Like, my brain's going fast. Oh, I see what you mean. How about this? And she always felt like it was me. I think she experienced it when we didn't have consciousness around it as I'm always thinking I'm right. My voice is more important. I want to shut her down. I don't care about what she's saying. And so, you know, when I have consciousness to it and I can say, oh, here's the different way my brain, this is the way my brain works. Suddenly she can have compassion for me. I can have compassion for her. I recognize that my brain's not the same as hers or everyone else's. I can change a little bit more what I'm doing based on knowing, oh, okay, I just have to stop talking. Like, just stop, you know, because she's going to experience it as that I think I'm right and I don't care about her voice, rather than me being the truth, which is I'm excited and I've got an idea and I see what she's saying and I understand it and I want to
Yeah.
engage, you know? I don't know that that's specifically related to content creation, but I think the piece that is related to content creation is the idea of the not being able to niche and just having so many different ideas and not wanting to shut the door on any of them because they're all equally compelling. And that's why I keep on always looking for the through lines between things, because that connection between all the different things is what makes sense of it for me. It what makes it manageable. It what makes having this ADHD brain that has so many different ideas a superpower instead of a liability, because I can say, oh, I have all these things and I can draw connections between this and that. I think I see that as being very ADHD, where we draw connections between many
Yeah.
different things. So I don't know. That's one answer to your question. Does that answer some of it?
Yeah, it's good. And then also, like one of my biggest challenges with being an ADD, I got a tip from it earlier in our interview. I have trouble with consistency and like keeping at the thing because you've kept concentration for a long time, but you've said be okay taking long breaks and coming back to it. And then also you have a content creator you meet with regularly to check in, like accountability partners almost. So I think that is helpful too. And I want to highlight that for the audience. Have an accountability partner on the same journey as you, and be okay jumping in and out of things. Just because you fell off the wagon doesn't mean you have to stay off. You can hop back on.
Yeah. And you know, something that the high level creators do, and I think even those of us who are smaller creators should do it too, is, and you know, TikTok, for example, organizes these things where they invite 10 or 15 top level creators to come to a house and spend the weekend there working on creating content together.
Oh,
And I
fun.
personally think that's something that us lower level content creators should do too, is we should create co-working environments where we get together for a day or a weekend and we're working on content together, and maybe we have meetings and talk about things and then we all go off and create content for an hour, then we can come back. I think that'd be an awesome thing. I've long, it's one of those other shiny objects like, oh, I should do that, I should create that, you know. So far I haven't acted on it.
Oh yeah, because the young kids on TikTok have the hype houses. They all live in a house
The hype house,
together.
exactly.
Yeah, and create all kinds of content. That's wild.
Yeah, like something like that for smaller creators where we just intentionally get together to create content together, I think would be awesome.
Yeah, that is great. Oh, I really want to talk about this. So, you put out a lot of content on the internet, and the internet is not always a nice place. How do you deal with
Mhm.
haters, trolls, and even just the constant feedback loop of having a, public life on the internet?
Some people create content that's very controversial, and as a result, that becomes something that they deal with on a regular basis. And so that's the kind of question it'd be great to ask them. I feel that I am very balanced and I like to be a bridge between different ideas. So my automatic inclination is to put out content where you can see both sides. It's not so black and white. I'm not a black and white thinker. I'm a very gray, shades of gray thinker. And I
Mm-hmm.
usually the truth and the opposite side too. And whenever I share content, it usually has some aspect of that as the foundation. Is what I share is my perspective, and it's also, and both and true, and that's also true. So I don't find myself in that position very often, but I have had a couple of times where I posted content that really triggered people. And one of those was a time when I posted something about my perspective. Somebody put a question out and said, "Hey, people who have kids, I'm really curious. Share why you think having a kid has been a great thing for you." And so I did a
Mm-hmm.
response video to that. I did a stitch and I said, well, one of the things that I found about having kids is that it really gives you an opportunity to think out and to put someone else's needs ahead of yours. And there's something so beautiful about that experience that before I had kids, my life was essentially about me. And
Mm-hmm.
and I found it to be really beautiful to have someone else matter more than I matter to myself. Whoa, did that trigger people? Triggered people in big ways. I got so many comments saying, "Who are you to say that having kids is the only way to be?" Of course, I wasn't saying that. How are you to say that you can only love someone if you have kids? I love my dogs. Like, so it triggered people in so many ways, and I got a lot of negative responses. And so I would say the way that I responded to that was to have empathy for where people are coming from. And it got so much out of control, I couldn't really respond to everything, but to the degree to which I was able to respond, I was like, I really hear what you're saying, and here and that's not what I was saying. I was saying this, or I empathize with your situation, or try to explain it where, and a lot of people did this on my behalf too, is said, I was simply answering the question from my perspective to the query that was asked.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just try to bring my reasonableness and I will try to always take the high road in response to people's responses, because I don't think doing anything else just creates more negativity, and I don't really want to participate in that. So I'll always be
Yeah.
diffusing negativity, or I'll have compassion for it. And I haven't had very many situations where people are overtly mean just for the sake of being mean, like total trolls. I have had that more on my TikTok lives where someone will come in and say, "Oh, are you a man?" Like, just trying to, or say, "You're so old, grandma," or whatever. Like, just, usually you know and usually when I get those kind of things, I'm like, oh, we got the teenage boys in here again. It's okay, I
Yeah.
hear you, I see you, it's okay, you're doing all right. And then I'll have people in my life saying, just get rid of them, block them, or whatever, and I'm like, it's okay. And then it gets to a point where I'll do a lecture, right? I'll do a little lecture that'll send me into on the live saying, so and so is saying, things that they're trying to trigger me. And my friend over here is saying I should just block them, but I don't want to block them because I think it's really important for us to see the other side. And, we can have some compassion for this person who's probably a 14-year-old boy who doesn't really know how to have compassion for someone's going to come into someone else's live TikTok and say, wow, you look like a grandma or whatever, like in for the intention of triggering. That person
Yeah.
doesn't have a life. That person, we can have compassion for that person because they're not living a rich whole life. So let's
Yeah.
just feel for them. So I kind of take that perspective overall, is that when people come in just for the purpose of being mean, oh, we can just feel sorry for them. And if people come in because they're triggered, then we can have compassion for the fact that they're triggered. And if people are, I would say one thing, I have a little bit of a challenge, and this is a different thing around cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole cancel culture thing is really difficult. And for me, the way I see it is that if someone is, and it's sort of related, if someone feels inclined to cancel someone else because they don't agree or because they find what they said so offensive, to me, that is a trauma response. You don't cancel other people unless you're acting out of trauma in your own self, in my opinion, you know?
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, you
you're
can
like,
disagree with
yeah.
someone, but trying to cancel them and shut them up, that's a trauma response. Like, I was shut up, so I'm going to shut you up, or something like that.
See, I think that's interesting. I never saw it as a trauma response, but I saw it as a need for connection and community. I'm not
Yeah.
on I'm not on Twitter, but usually when there's a Twitter pile on, it's people trying to be a part of the mob, a part of the community. Like we're all righteous together, canceling this person, shutting them down, and people band together in this tribe to cancel another person. So I saw it more as like a need for connection, but that could also be a trauma
I
response
think
as
it's
well.
true
Yeah.
also. I think it's a need for, I
Yeah.
mean, our need for connection can be, we can have a need for connection that we don't know how to have unless we are negative towards another person. That can, they're not mutually exclusive. I think they probably exist together quite often.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also I like your answer that you haven't gotten that many mean comments, because that's one of my fears. Like I can take criticism, and I have gotten criticism on the internet before because I've been doing it on and off for a long time. But part of me is like happy I'm a very teeny tiny creator, because all I get are nice comments now. But it's because my audience is so small. I haven't
Yeah.
attracted to haters. Like on TikTok, I had one video go semi-viral and I got haters, but my followers jumped in and defended me on my behalf. I didn't even have to do anything. But that's one of my fears. I have like this like picture putting your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. Like I want to grow and I want to be more popular, but part of me is afraid because like the bigger you are, the more haters you get and the more crazy people you attract.
I
So
think you just have to take them in stride and know that people are going to do that. And especially true, I think the bigger you get, the more you deal with it and just see it as being part of the, part of one, part of the landscape. And two, honestly, I like when I've been able to respond to people in that way, because I also believe that is a healing. Like if you can respond to somebody's hate with being and rise up above it, I believe that that is a healing too, because other people see it and they're like, oh, I don't have to get reactive. I didn't have to lash out. I didn't have to protect myself. I could just be, whoa, this person needs compassion. I think there's something,
yeah.
it's sort of, I mean, I don't really, this expression is questionable, but the idea of kill them with kindness, take that, like respond to hate with love wherever you can. I'm not saying bypass your own feelings, but to the degree to which you can, I think it can be a healing choice.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And it's just setting a good example, making the internet a better place.
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing that I'd say is that, and I don't know what this pertains to, but since I've been a creator, I've had so many people say things like, things like, I wouldn't want to be on TikTok because TikTok's terrible. All there is on TikTok is like pick whatever, right?
Yeah.
Teenagers in bikinis, people doing hate stuff, like whatever it is. I wouldn't want to be on Facebook because my Facebook feed is just not filled with nothing but total meaningless nonsense. Or I don't want to be on Instagram because it creates a lot of negativity around body images or whatever. The algorithms are powerful, and social media is a perfect example of what you put out is what you get. What you put
Yes.
your attention on is what you get. And I would say to anybody, somebody tells me, "Oh, my TikTok feed is filled with teenage girls in bathing suits." I'm like, that's either because you got on the platform and you haven't trained it to tell you, "Oh, what I really want to see is uplift, positive quotes that help me be a better person," or because that's what you're looking at and it's paying it back to you. So
Exactly.
social media is a reflect, it's a beautiful mirror of who we are. So be that way in your content, be that way in what you're following and what you pay attention to, and you get more of it.
Yeah, exactly. Lately, I've been really into these beautiful pictures. There's these beautiful, like, interior decorating rooms and these beautiful landscapes, and I keep paying more attention to it, so I keep getting more of it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
more of that. And then I get people's beautiful, like, uplifting, like, family things, and, like, I have a lot of coaches on my feed and, like, a lot of great messages because that's what I, like, linger on. That's what I click like on. And so I get that. So I love the way I've trained my algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that if there's a spiritual truth to the idea of what you put your attention on is what shows up more in your life. It's explicitly illustrated in social media.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings me to my next question. Do you think social media is helping or hurting society?
I think it's both for that exact reason that whatever, I think you can go down the dark side of the internet and make a really good argument for the fact that there's so much negative stuff that's as a result of it and that people are being exposed to a lot of negative stuff. But the reverse or the alternate is also true, which is there's so many beautiful things to be had and known through having exposure to a wide range of things. So if I compare, for example, my teens and young adulthood to my kids' young teens and adulthood, I have a 24-year-old and an 18-year-old. I always tell them that when I was your age, I had no exposure to anything. When I was 18, I only knew the people who lived in my neighborhood. I only knew the people who went to my
Yeah.
school. I only knew the people who were my cousins. And if I met somebody who I wasn't directly related to, who didn't go to my school, it was probably because I was at my cousin's house and their next door neighbor came over, you know? But
Yeah.
my kids are exposed from an early age, for better and for worse, to a huge variety of experiences and personal stories. And I believe that they have a wider vision of the world, and they have a lot more wisdom, and they have a lot more. They have a bigger, broader perspective than I had at their age, because they have, for better and for worse, more of a whole world, like a worldview that I just did not have. And so, of course, there's dangers that come with that. Like, it's Pandora's box, right? Pandora's box. When you open
Mm-hmm.
Pandora's box, you get all the beautiful complexities, but you get all the dangerous dark. And I think the same is true with social media. So if you use it as a skill to expose yourself to things that are going to bring you up in the world, that are going to help you bring other people up in the world, that are going to help you make the world a better place, then social media is an incredible tool for doing so. But if you are not discriminating or discerning about where you spend your energy, your time, your likes, your own content creation, yeah, it can take you to some dark places. So, like anything else,
Yeah.
it's a tool, and how we use it going to result in whether it's positive for the world or negative for the world.
I agree. I couldn't agree with what you said more. This is something I'm really curious about your perspective on. So you've had experience as an actress in like mainstream Hollywood, and now you have done a lot of independent content creation. Can you juxtapose the pros and cons of each world? Because a big mission of my show is to help people choose the right path for them. So what are the pros and cons of mainstream Hollywood versus indie content creation?
Wow, that's a great question. So the context is that I was a film and television actor. I did my film job when I was about 24, and I did my last one when I was about 33. And when I did my last, I was pregnant with my oldest kid. And I mean, I've done a couple things since then, but that's when I was really in the mainstream world of film and TV. And I would say, so that's the context for my background. It's been a while, and it was in a different time period. It was not, there was not streaming. There was not, like, there's a lot more distribution channels now than there was then. And so there's a lot more need for content. There's also been huge transformation in the way the media portrays mixed race people, which I am,
Mm-hmm.
which I identify as. And there just was not, mainstream media did not portray mixed race people. They were trying to fit us into slots. That was not something that was known or seen or spoke about. Families were always one monoracial, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's changed. And then being a woman over 30 or 35 has also changed in mainstream media. Now there's a lot more work for women over 30 or 35. When I was in my mid 30s, it wasn't so great on that count. So that's the context. And I would say that the benefits of, and I've already named some of these, the benefits of there being more access for independent content creators to create content and to distribute it direct to the viewer, direct to consumers, is that we have a lot more freedom. We have a lot more
Mm-hmm.
voices in the space. We can hear from people from with every experience. So we get exposed to more things. And then as content creators, we have more accessibility to have our voices be promoted. Whereas, and I said this earlier, whereas when in the mainstream media, you have to wait for someone else to decide that you're valuable enough to their topic area. You have to jump through hoops to audition or do recalls or do screen tests, and then you have to also, you've given your autonomy away. And that's why we see things like the Me Too movement, because the people who have the ability to choose who's going to be a content creator, who's going to be a on-camera performer, have all the power, and the person who is the creator or the performer does not have any autonomy. Whereas now we have autonomy. We can create our own stories. We can create our own small budget films. We can create our little skits on TikTok. We can create new
Mm-hmm.
characters on TikTok. And you see so many amazing content creators who've developed performance careers for themselves by doing fun TikTok videos with different characters. There's tons, of those people. So there's way more sovereignty and way more autonomy. and way more access and availability for more people. And it doesn't have the same cachet, I suppose. I Yeah, it doesn't have the same. It was exciting for it was an exciting place to be a film and television actor in the in the top in the mainstream world. So I
Hmm.
don't know if there's pros or cons. I think you're lucky if you can do both. You definitely have way more power over. You're way more empowered by being an independent content creator than by waiting for someone to decide that you're star worthy.
That makes sense. That makes sense. But I'm assuming there's more money in the mainstream, right?
I mean, I guess it depends. Like, there's certainly independent content creators who make way more money than probably 99.9% of actors, because
Oh, interesting.
99.9% of actors don't make any money. They're below
Yeah.
the poverty line. There's a very, very small percentage. I'm not sure if it's 0.5 or 0.3 or 1% or 2%, but the number of actors who make above the poverty line is very, very small. There's this group of working actors, and then the number that are stars that make a lot of money are very tiny. And I've never done the comparison, but I'm willing to bet that if you put all the money made by independent content creators beside all the money made by people who are SAG actors, I'm going to bet that overall the independent content creator number is higher. I mean, maybe not. Let's
Interesting.
say you take out like the huge stars who are making, millions of dollars per film. Like you take out, say, like the top A list of famous Hollywood stars. Take them out, and I'm going to guess that you're going to have, my guess would be that there's collectively more people making, like collectively more money made by independent content creators because there's more of them.
I could believe it because I used to be into self publishing, indie publishing. So I looked at those numbers, and the indie publishers, on average, make more money than the traditional published authors for sure.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that because they're not also paying all the people to help them get there. If you're,
Exactly.
yeah. So, yeah.
Nice. Okay, now I'm just being nosy. So you are really gorgeous and really good in front of the camera, and you really want to empower, women over 40 and over 50 to be visible. So I'm curious, would you do the Golden Bachelor if you were asked, or a show like that, and why or why not?
I love the idea of reality shows, and I do watch a few of those, not very many. I don't watch much TV, but the things I have watched, I've been kind of amused by the reality shows, and I also love dance reality shows. But I also think that a lot of the reality shows are not really reality. I think they're stalked and they're followed. I mean, is science completely unbiased? I don't think so. I think they make reality shows look like the reality, but they're so impacted by the details. So it would feel a little bit of the worst of both worlds in a way. Like I'm showing myself
Mhm.
who I really am in a reality world. Yeah, I think it's the bit of the worst of both worlds because you're having to be yourself and you're exposing who you really are, but you don't have the autonomy and sovereignty over the editing, over who it goes to, over how it gets perceived. So you're giving up your sovereignty, but you're still showing who you really are. So I think I'd rather, if I'm going to show who I really am, that I have autonomy over how it gets received and put out into the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thanks for joining me, Lisa. If people want more Lisa LaCroix, where can they find you?
My website is lisalacroix.com, and LaCroix, I say LaCroix, but people say LaCroix if they know the water. So it's you can maybe put in the show notes, but my
Yeah.
website's lisalacroix.com. I'm on TikTok at Lisa_LaCroix.
Awesome. Well, it has been great. Thank you so much for joining me.
That was so fun, Jasmine. Thank you for having me on and for asking such great deepening questions. You really did a great job, and I'm honored to have been here with you.
Awesome. And to my creator kings and kings, keep creating.